Hello. I only have 23 minutes of camera time left on this card, so I'm gonna try to use it wisely, and we're gonna try to get this little art thing going. And I'm gonna tell you what we're doing today, what's on the easel today. So literally on the easel is this like deity vibe type of painting that I'm doing, and we're gonna finish her up first. Then I did these clouds. They're pretty cool. I don't know if you can tell like the effect, but they're oil pastel clouds, but they're also then they have this oil paint fluorescent pink underneath them to give them that like cool glow that clouds have. And my idea for the second painting we want to do for this video is this oil pastel and gouache painting that I started, but we're gonna add oil paintings or oil paint to the oil pastel flowers. And like I said, this is something I have done with this, but that's the only thing I really experimented with oil pastel and then oil paint on top of it. So we'll see how that goes, but let's get started. Let's make sure I'm in frame. And I will be listening to American politics or like news, unfortunately, so sorry about that.
Show you daily dive into the news. My name is Philip DeFranco, and we have a lot to talk about today, starting with this. Let's talk about one of the most requested stories over on the text line today, and that is this disturbing Amaranth situation. I mean, if you don't know her, she's one of the bigger and more controversial streamers out there on the internet. She made a name for herself on Twitch doing hot tub streams, cosplay, adult content on platforms, OnlyFans. She's built a massive following, a multi-million-dollar brand, all while making headlines or pushing the boundaries of online content. Now she's back in the news today because police showed up to her home after she and her husband were in an hours-long screaming match over on the kid. With all this playing out over a long time, most of it being streamed, and I'm only going to touch on the most viral moments. During this, they talked about so much.
I think I'm going to make it orange, but I actually think I'm going to make it burnt umber.
With at one point, her husband accusing her of cheating.
That is not even true. Oh my god.
Okay. So
we can talk about that, sure. I had to go on
umber.
dates I didn't want to go on, and then you started calling me when we were at the karaoke bar a lot. That is no.
So, she denies it. He continues to say she hooked up with someone and that he caught them. And then at other points, they argued about the fact that the fight was happening on the stream. With Amaranth saying that he knew that she was on stream when this all started, so it should be on him to get out, not on her to stop streaming.
I'm telling you I don't want to be streamed.
No.
I am telling you I don't want to be streamed.
Well,
and you are streaming. So that is literally me. And you're sitting here saying it's consensual because you're here.
I can stream my own house. You don't have to be here. You don't have to stay.
I literally am a member of this household as well.
Yeah, but you don't have to be in this room.
I'm not unokay with being observed.
Okay, great.
I'm unokay with you pointing the camera.
Well, then leave. I'm not gonna follow you.
Then a quick cut or pause in the stream with it then picking up from a new angle where we see this.
Talk about problems. Hey, what the f is wrong with you, bro? Leave. You can move. You can go away.
I wasn't in camera view. You moved the camera view.
What is wrong with you? You got some problems, man.
The two then continue arguing, and then all of a sudden we hear a knock at the door.
See it in time. Right. I don't know.
It's not alarming to you? That's okay.
Well, because we have police as our security guards, and Chris is coming out on the time, so I don't know.
Guys.
It's then pretty hard to hear what the officer officers are saying as they stay in the background, but they eventually do call over Amaranth to talk as well. They're seemingly asking, are you okay? What's happening? But again, most of it's pretty hard to hear since they're removed from the camera setup. But it's also not where the talk of police ended, because at another point she accused her husband of doxing her.
What's up? What are you doing?
Calling the police.
Why?
Because you're doxing at this point. It's dangerous.
What?
You have reached the Houston
What the
Emergency 911. All call takers are busy at this time. Your call will be
I don't know if I like how this is going, but
Alright, here we go.
it's just going how it's going.
Please.
The rest of the 911 call then gets muted after the operator asked her for her address, and the stream stayed mute for a few minutes. But then also another clip that's been making the rounds is one where you have the husband complaining about their financial situation, with them noting that her content creation is making less than it used to in prior years. So I will say, once you hear what the monthly take-home is, you may lose sympathy.
We have a kid contract. And we still do OnlyFans. She does. Right? The amount of money we make with both, with the exception of the last 2 months, has always been
Okay,
less
this is
than
terrible.
what OnlyFans alone
So
used to make in 22 and 23. 2022
we're just gonna
and
do the
2023.
swirl. Wait
Back
for
then,
this to
OnlyFans
dry
was
and then
monthly of
paint
$2
over
million.
it later.
Currently,
So I think I'm gonna do.
but this month and every other month under the kid contract, kid plus OnlyFans, I did about 1.2, 1.3. Sometimes 1.5.
Right, so the reactions to all of
I'm
this,
gonna do
they're all
pale
over the place,
purple.
especially depending on which platform you're seeing the clip, and also what specific clip people
For
are
the
reacting
swirl.
to. Some noting that a few years ago, Amaranth had accused her husband of emotional abuse, which makes them more concerned about this live-streamed argument. People saying things like, Kate genuinely not intervening with the whole Amaranth situation should be the final nail in the coffin for them, to be honest. If it's rage bait or not, how are you going to continue to allow a channel that has an active DV case unfolding while people watch, ban the account, shut it down? Though this also, as you had some thinking, all of this is staged for clicks. There being this general feeling that when it comes to adult content creators and OF pages in general, like any attention is good attention, even if it seems bad. So then all of that is you had others thinking that if this fight was real, it points to greater issues in our culture. Saying things like, it's incredibly weird when you and your significant other are airing your personal business for hours at a time because it's great content and ultimately don't care about yourselves or your well-being. And again, this isn't everything. There were over 10 hours of this being live streamed. But in the meantime, as we wait to see if anything comes from this, I kind of pass the question up to you. What are your thoughts here? But then, next up, we should talk about the big news that Donald Trump wants to make drugs way, way cheaper for Americans and way more expensive for everyone else. With the president today announcing an executive order that's meant to bring pharmaceutical prices down in the States.
But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries and will no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma. But again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing, but they've gotten away with it.
The order, it does a few different things, starting with a directive to HHS to set targets for drug price reductions for publicly insured health programs in private markets in the United States within 30 days, which should kick off a round of negotiations between the federal government and drug makers. Next, the Justice Department and Federal Trade Commission are directed to stop anti-competitive practices. And finally, HHS will facilitate direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical sales at most favored nation
Okay, I like this swirl a lot better than I like these eyes.
Policy of negotiating lower drug prices for Medicare, which is something that Trump criticized in the briefing, though he didn't say what he would do differently. But anyways, right, the numbers that he promised, they're huge, though some saying take it with a grain of salt because it's Donald Trump.
60, 70, 80, 90%. But actually more than that if you think about it in the way mathematically.
Now with all this, you might be surprised to hear that pharmaceutical stock prices actually rose after this announcement, with the belief that the apparent reason for that is that the industry was expecting something much harsher from the administration, such as congressional legislation or regulations changing how the government pays for certain drugs. And that is, you also had Trump claiming that this will actually increase revenue for the industry because it'll raise prices abroad. Right, so for example, the order directs the U.S. Trade Representative and the Commerce Department to take action against what it called unreasonable and discriminatory policies in other countries that keep their own prices lower, with officials saying they'll focus on lowering prices for drugs with the highest cost disparities between the U.S. and other developed nations whose government-run healthcare systems Trump doesn't like.
This means American patients were effectively subsidizing socialist healthcare systems.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. It turns out one of the fastest growing segments of people signing up for Mint are people over the age of 55.
Worst part of YouTube
so
is the
I decided
ads.
to call our 55 plus plan.
In Germany, in all parts of the European Union, they were the toughest of all. They were nasty.
So right now, it's unclear how much leverage the U.S. actually has over other countries, since they're already locked into contracts with American drug makers, and they can decline to cover the drugs at all if prices go up. In response to this, while there's been some criticism that the move doesn't go far enough, or it's not the right kind of action, or that U.S. patients get quicker access to drugs because of the higher prices, the general reaction seems to be mostly positive, which isn't surprising, because lowering drug prices is one of the issues that's popular among both Democrats and Republicans, or at least Republican voters. And so one of the examples you had out there was Mark Cuban, a Democrat, just firing off praise on social media for the move, saying, "Gotta be honest, the Trump EO on healthcare and in particular drug pricing could save hundreds of billions." But then listed a ton of different ways that the Trump administration could get drug prices down, notably by regulating the industry and targeting pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. I mean, we've talked about them before. They're basically middlemen who negotiate between insurance companies and pharmacies, and critics argue they profit off artificially inflating prices. And so you have Cuban claiming that the level of opacity that the big PBMs create is why the price of drug brands are outrageous. But then also taking the opportunity to promote Cost Plus Drugs, which is the company that he founded a few years ago to offer lower price generics by cutting out the PBMs. With all that said, of course, this is breaking news. We've got to see what comes from the executive order, whether it's actually effective, and whether it's followed by any durable legislation, especially because the other big bit of healthcare news right now is that the House Republicans' budget plan would cut hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid, throwing millions of Americans off their insurance, and contains nothing about lowering drug prices. Then, next up today, in huge economic news, the U.S. and China have now reached a deal to temporarily slash tariffs for 90 days. Over the world's two largest economies working to de-escalate a trade war that has potential to cause a global recession. And in an announcement today, following weekend negotiations in Geneva, U.S. officials said that American tariffs on Chinese goods would be reduced from 145% to 30%, with Beijing saying it would cut its tariffs on U.S. products from 125% to 10%. The one, it's not immediate, right? These reductions are set to take effect this Wednesday. And two, some key trade restrictions will remain in place. With those, including the 20% tariff that Trump issued back in February over what he claims was China's failure to stop the trafficking of chemicals used to make fentanyl to the U.S., as well as the 10% baseline tariff that he imposed on nearly every U.S. trading partner. And so as a result, China will also keep its tariffs on U.S. agricultural products, which it imposed in retaliation for Trump's fentanyl-related duties. So we also saw Beijing agreeing to suspend or cancel some non-tariff retaliatory measures, which included things like certain export restrictions and the practice of blacklisting dozens of U.S. companies. In a joint statement released by the White House and China's Ministry of Commerce, the two governments said that they had agreed on the 90-day pause, quote, "in the spirit of mutual opening, continued communication, cooperation, and mutual respect, and in order to recognize, quote, the importance of their bilateral economic and trade relationship to both countries and the global economy," with a statement saying that this pause will remain in place as the two sides continue